Hi there, I'm SPD. Why does that keep happening? It is next time, and I'm ready to wheel and deal. Patches. If you hadn't guessed it yet, today I'll be sharing my Patches build with everybody. For those who don't know me, I'm a prolific poster of patches, pranks, and ploys, and today I'm excited to share not just my gear and stats, but also some tips and tricks to help you achieve maximum mischief. So let's jump right in. I prefer to keep my Patches at level 60, and he is what you would call a Vigor main. Clearly, all of my points are in Vigor, with just the bare minimum and everything else to use my gear. Bear in mind here that my base dexterity is actually 14, not 19, because I'm using a talisman that gives me plus 5. Now it looks like kind of a funky build, but at this rune level, most of the damage just comes from the weapon upgrade level and not my damage stats. And I'm not here trying to really win some duels, I'm mostly focused on knocking people off ledges. Oh, sorry about that, Pumpkinhead. But if I were to do a meta level build, it'd look something like this. Probably just go for a strength build, where I'd hit the first cap for endurance, then put just enough dexterity so I can use my Urumi, and finally dump the rest into strength. Strength has some pretty fun options. It would let you use the jar cannon, as well as the inverted Hawk Tower shield, which is Patch's actual shield in the game. The only difference I would make after that would be to change the infusion for all of my weapons to heavy, to actually take advantage of the stats. Let's switch over and start talking about our weapons. In the main hand, a generic spear, and I went ahead and put the Kick Ash of War on that. It seems like, to me, a mandatory option for this character, all things considered, so, give it a try. And I also do carry 2 other spears, one with Lightning Ram on it, because what a hilarious Ash of War. Really catches people off guard and is surprisingly strong. Oh my gosh, look at him go. And the last option is a short spear, actually, with Charge Forth on it. I like to carry a short spear because the moveset has a unique R2 that's kind of a double poke, and a follow-up triple poke. That moveset is pretty fun to play with, and the Ash of War Charge Forth has really long range, can knock people off cliffs too. So it's a pretty nice tool to have on you. Now, I know the short spear you don't see Patches use, but he runs an Emporium. He has a lot of stuff you don't see him use, including the shield that I'm using, actually. This one looks pretty close and doesn't take 30 strength to use, and this has Shield Crash on it. I went ahead and put Cold on this as well. The Frost buildup is 123, which is pretty crazy, and the Ash of War has got great range, great damage, and I probably get more kills with this than anything else. And I'll show some clips later where you can see how effective it is. As a main hand swap, I have a Lightning Misery Cord because it has the highest critical damage. I keep Raptor on the Mist on it because it's a very useful utility skill, and a lot of times you end up invading in places with chariots. It's nice to have, very quickly accessible. For the offhand swap, I have a Great Knife with parry on it because I believe the term is extra. I also find the Spear and Dagger moveset combinations to be kind of fun and surprising, and it catches people off guard a lot of the time. Some other nice options would be the Buckler. I put Shield Crash on it because it surprises people, but I recommend Carry and Retaliation for the longest parry window, and the ability to parry spells. Last but not least, we need to go through our talismans. I run the Concealing Veil, which makes you invisible when you're crouching away from enemies, the Shard of Alexander for that Ash of War boost, Millicent's Prosthesis for dexterity, and also that bonus of the attack power with successive attacks. Honestly, if you just have the Dexterity Talisman, that'd be fine too. And finally, the Frobvinker's Trick Mirror is a necessary item. I'm going to link a video so you can see some good evidence for that. In my flask, it's just both of the exploding tears. I also want to mention that a big part of this build is me carrying a lot of extra tools with me. So in the next section, I'm going to pick out some good clips that demonstrate how to use the different tools we've got. So load up on Rainbow Stones, grab a bite, and let's roll. The first thing I want to cover is Shield Crash. I mentioned earlier it's probably the best move, and I stand by it. The most important things are the positioning and the timing. Luckily, it's super forgiving, and it has a very long range. You can see I start the skill wise in the air here, and it pushes him so far backwards. Also, as soon as you get someone locked into that stun animation, it's really hard for them to escape it. Just be careful, because it's also quite easy to follow them over the edge. Come on, Patches. Some people might be a little afraid to come over at first, but just stick with it and you can convince them. It's also important to remember that these are real people. Don't let the power go to your head. Shield Crash is really fun. But probably the most useful technique that I have is Shield Crash has a fun property where it's actually blocking as you're attacking. So as long as you start it ahead of time, you can block an attack and then just completely push someone over. It's wonderful. Since it's a great shield, if you've got full stamina, a lot of times you can tank, unless you're up against a colossal weapon. Just make sure you start early enough, otherwise you can get interrupted. Once your shield hits the ground though, you're good. If you're facing faster attacks like spells or maybe even a katana, then make sure you have a little bit of room before you try and shield crash. And also it's good to note that it does have a shorter version, but I like the fully charged version. Though there are definitely some scenarios where it's nice to have a short range one. It's also not limited to just hitting one person, which is kind of fun. So overall, it's one of the most versatile and strong skills that I use, and I highly recommend playing around with it, even if you're not doing a Patches build. Next up is the Jar Cannon. I personally use it without the stat requirements because I just use it to knock people off ledges, but you could move 7 points from Vigor to Strength to take advantage of the damage as well. So it shoots Great Bolts, and the two that you really want to look for are the Lightning Great Bolt and the Explosive Great Bolt. Aside from damage type, the main difference is the Lightning Great Bolt flies in a straight line, whereas the Explosive Great Bolt has an arced path. Let's check out some examples. In this first one, you'll notice that I'm going to point directly at the bridge because I'm going to shoot a lightning bolt, and I also have to lead him a little bit because it takes a second to fire. So bear in mind the timing of it, you kind of have to be shooting in front of people. It has very, very long range, and the attack actually is an area of an effect, so you can hit a few people at once, which is nice. The area of effect can be pretty big, so you kind of just have to hit near the person. A lot of the time, I'm not even really aiming at them, I'm really aiming at the ground nearby. It's a technique that definitely comes in handy when hosts try to hide right around corners. Or telephone poles. Remember not to get too carried away, keep an eye on your back. It's also worth noting that they still get knocked back even if you hit the ground next to them, and they get knocked back pretty far. Also, while it is significantly less common, sometimes you might find a host above you, and what I like to do is don't shoot the host, shoot the ground underneath and behind them, and you can sometimes knock them off the ledge. This guy, I don't know how he had no life, but it does work when they have more life too. If you're going to use explosive Great Bolts, remember you have to aim a lot higher than the actual person you're shooting at, so aim up above them. It can be particularly challenging to get the aiming right if you're not on the same level, so play around with it a little bit. It definitely gets easier with practice. If you'd like more examples, I'll link a video with 25 of my longest range jar cannons and some fun dance moves. Next up is Kick. Now, Kick doesn't really seem like it's a very strong move, and even if you have someone walking along a ledge, you're probably not going to be able to kick them off the ledge because they only move back like a half step, and it's usually not very strong, aside from, obviously, being better than Comet Azure. The real benefit is that it will instantly guard break anyone guarding, whether with a shield or a two-handed weapon, and there's one particularly subtle way to know when someone's going to guard. When you see it, just follow these very, very careful steps. Equip your kicking spear. Approach carefully so as not to startle the host. Apply Misery Cord to the affected area. The main thing is just to get close enough to actually pull it off. It's not going to work against someone overly aggressive. Next on the list is Charge Forth. Now this one's pretty similar to Shield Crash, they both involve pushing your enemy away, but it doesn't have the benefit of blocking while you're attacking. To make up for that though, what it does have is a much longer range and a much quicker attack speed. It still shoves people back and can be a fun alternative or mix-up. Since Patches has no poise, make sure before you start charging that you're clear of attacks, because you will get interrupted. But I do recommend checking it out, because a lot of people don't expect it, and it's a pretty fun attack. The one thing to look out for is if someone is more experienced, they might know that they can roll past the attack, but a lot of times if you're in a precarious situation, you can catch a panic roll. Good job, Patches. So we'll keep moving along, and the next item I'd like to highlight is called the Concealing Veil. This is a talisman, and I know talismans are precious, but I definitely think this one's worthwhile. What it does is it conceals you while you're crouching away from other people. And you can see here in this invasion, I immediately equipped it because I was out in a giant open field, and I didn't want to be an easy target a mile away. And at this point, I'm completely invisible to the players. I saw they were already pre-buffed, and they had some good bleed weapons, so I didn't really want to walk into a blender. Instead, I'm just going to watch them and see what they do for a second. A lot of times in invasions, people think you have to run right in and start attacking immediately, but honestly, there's a huge benefit to getting a lay of the land before you start attacking. So I do a little trick here where I can see the players are kind of facing away, so I position myself so the second that I'm visible, I'm actually still going to be behind a bush from their field of view. And since I'm not glowing red because of my trick mirror, these guys didn't even notice me standing right next to them. If you like to be sneaky, honestly, these two items together make for a totally different game. Particularly when paired with this super secret technique I'm about to show you. I call it standing still. Furled Finger's vision is actually based on movement, so if you're still, they're not gonna see you. Trust me. Just remember all the times the camera did something crazy, and remember that they're dealing with the same thing. It's kinda crazy how many times I've been completely missed within an inch of the host. So give it a try and let me know how it works out for you. My last example is just a general playstyle invasion. So remember to get some rainbow stones, put them on your belt. They are very fun to lay traps with. Even if you just place a couple along a ledge, a lot of the times people are going to be very wary around that, so you can lay all sorts of traps. At this point in the invasion, I still hadn't found them, so there's no way I'm going to stand out here in plain sight. And when they came down the elevator, I noticed that there's a little bit of lag, but I was able to sneak onto the elevator and I don't think they noticed me. Wearing the trick mirror always pays off. Even when I tried to attack with a shield crash, they didn't seem to hear it and they kind of just ran off down the hallway, which was a great opportunity for me. You can really be pretty sloppy with patches, and it's a very forgiving build because people don't really pay attention when you're not glowing bright red. We've got a great opportunity for a shield crash here, but unfortunately I did get stuck on the terrain. When it gets too hectic, it's easy enough to just kind of scamper off and then regroup. I almost ran all the way down, but I decided I'd wait here, and it actually paid off pretty nicely as the Phantom came down to join us right away, and I was able to actually get that shield crash off. I tried to lure the host the rest of the way down by showing him the way, but he didn't want to come down for some reason. I'm not sure why. This kind of invasion to me is the most fun, because it's not really just a duel. You're kind of running around, you're relying on traps and trickery and terrain and all sorts of fun things. This is a great situation where the host needs just a little bit of encouragement to come down and play, and that's why I like to carry the jar cannon. You'll notice I aim at the bridge thinking he was going to run towards me, and then see he ran down the hall and even managed to... I got a little lucky here with that shot down the hallway. Poor guy. So that kind of covers most of the general tools. The nice thing about this build is that it's super flexible. Patches runs a whole emporium, and you can really bring in extra tools that you find useful. Fan daggers, acid spray mist, some other good thematic ones, or if you've got a weapon that you really like using, a lot of times it could probably fit into the playstyle. I hope you enjoyed the build guide. This is my first one, so let me know in the comments what you liked, what you didn't, what you'd like to see different next time. And as always, I'll be ready to wheel and deal come next time.